The trail is called Bonneville Shoreline. It winds along the eastern edge of the Wasatch Front, cutting through dry scrub oak and loose sandstone above Salt Lake City. It is a beautiful trail, a trail that thousands of runners use every single week, climbing switchbacks and descending ridgelines, with the valley spread out below them like a postcard. It is a trail that feels familiar, almost domestic, close enough to civilization that you can hear traffic far below, close enough to the city that runners often go out without a second thought about what might be sharing that landscape with them. Kyle Burgess was one of those runners. A young man who knew the trail well enough to feel comfortable on it, comfortable enough to run it alone in the early afternoon of October 2020. He had his earbuds in. He was filming as he ran, because that is what runners do now. They document, they share. They bring others along for the experience through a screen, through a phone held at arm's length or pointed down the trail ahead. And then he saw something in the brush alongside the path. He stopped his phone and pointed it at what he initially thought might be bear cubs. Small shapes moving in the scrub. He slowed down, curious, interested, not yet afraid. That changed almost immediately, because a mountain lion came out of the brush, a large female, and she looked directly at him, and she did not run. What followed over the next 6 minutes became one of the most widely watched pieces of wildlife footage ever captured in the American West. Not because it was perfectly filmed, not because the resolution was extraordinary, or the angle was cinematic. It went everywhere because it was real. Because it was raw, because every person who watched it could feel, in the pit of their stomach, exactly what Kyle Burgess was feeling. That particular combination of terror and the desperate, fragile effort to hold it together. If you have never watched that footage, stop everything and find it. And if you have watched it, you probably remember it perfectly, every second of it. But here is what most people who watched that video never fully understood. They saw 6 minutes of a man backing down a trail while a mountain lion stalked him. What they did not fully understand was the biology behind that cat, the behavior encoded into her. The decisions she was making, or more accurately, the non-decisions, the instincts running beneath her like a current she could not fully override. They did not understand what the landscape meant to her, what Kyle represented in her world, and why she was doing what she was doing instead of one of a dozen other things she could have done. And they did not understand how close it actually came to ending very differently. So if that sounds like something you want to understand, stay with us, because this is the full story, not just the footage. The whole thing. If you want more content like this, make sure you subscribe right now, because we cover these encounters the way they deserve to be covered, not as spectacle, as reality. Hit subscribe and let us get into it. Utah is mountain lion country, has been for thousands of years. The Wasatch Front, that dramatic wall of peaks that rises directly from the Salt Lake Valley floor, provides everything a mountain lion needs to not just survive but to thrive. Terrain with elevation change, broken by ridgelines and canyon systems, dense cover in the form of scrub oak and mahogany brush, abundant prey in the form of mule deer, which are present across the range in genuinely large numbers, and relative quiet on the upper slopes, particularly the lower canyons, where human-use trails create corridors of movement but rarely penetrate the cat's preferred bedding areas on steeper ground. Mountain lions in Utah are not rare. They are managed as a game species, which means the Division of Wildlife Resources tracks population estimates and issues hunting tags. Estimates place the state's lion population at somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 animals. That sounds like a lot until you consider the geography of Utah, which covers over 84,000 square miles of extraordinarily varied terrain. Spread 2,000 mountain lions across that landscape, and you begin to understand how rarely they are seen, even by people who spend enormous amounts of time moving through their habitat. But the Wasatch Front is not average lion habitat in one important way. It is some of the most intensively used outdoor recreation terrain in the American West. Tens of thousands of people run, hike, bike, and climb on these trails every single year. And the lions that inhabit the canyons along the Wasatch Corridor have adapted, to varying degrees, to human presence. They do not typically avoid people the way lions in truly remote wilderness tend to. They have grown accustomed to the sight and sound of humans moving through their territory. They have learned that humans are generally not a threat, and more critically, that humans are generally not prey. Generally. That caveat matters enormously, and we will return to it repeatedly. The mountain lion, known scientifically as puma concolor, carries more common names than almost any other animal in North America: cougar, puma, panther, catamount, painter. It has been called all of these things across different regions and different centuries. That diversity of names is itself a testament to how widespread the species once was, and how deeply it embedded itself in the consciousness of every human culture that shared a landscape with it. As a species, puma concolor is almost absurdly successful from a biological standpoint. It occupies a greater range of latitude than any other wild terrestrial mammal in the Western Hemisphere. From the northern reaches of the Yukon in Canada all the way to the southern tip of South America in Patagonia. From sea level in coastal California and Florida to elevations above 4,000 meters in the Andes. It is a cat that has figured out how to make almost any landscape work, provided that landscape contains two things: adequate prey and adequate cover. The animal itself is built for ambush. Every physical feature of a mountain lion is a compromise tilted toward explosive short-range acceleration rather than sustained pursuit. The hindquarters are massively developed relative to the forequarters, coiled with the kind of muscle architecture designed for vertical jumping rather than horizontal running. A mountain lion can leap vertically upward from a standing position to a height of 18 feet. It can jump horizontally across distances of 40 feet in a single bound. It can drop from heights of 60 feet onto prey below, without injury, absorbing the impact with a combination of muscular engagement and skeletal flexibility that would shatter the bones of almost any other animal. The claws are retractile and extraordinarily sharp, maintained by the natural sheathing that prevents contact with the ground during normal movement. The killing bite is aimed at the back of the skull or the base of the neck, a precision strike designed to sever the spinal cord or damage the brain with a single application of force. The jaw muscles are among the most powerful of any cat relative to body size, capable of maintaining grip on struggling prey far larger than the lion itself. An adult female mountain lion typically weighs between 80 and 120 pounds. Males are larger, often exceeding 150 pounds, and sometimes approaching 200 in areas with abundant prey. They are not the largest predators in North America. Grizzly bears and brown bears are far heavier, but pound for pound, the mountain lion is the most efficient killing machine on the continent. It kills things. That is what it does. It is the entire purpose of its design. And Kyle Burgess was standing between this animal and her cubs. This is the critical piece of context that the footage establishes almost immediately, but that many viewers either missed or did not fully register. When Kyle first spotted movement in the brush, what he saw were cubs. Kittens, technically, though mountain lion young are called kittens only in the loosest informal sense. They were young enough to still be awkward in their movements, still developing the coordination that would eventually make them among the most agile animals on Earth. And they were on one side of the trail. Their mother was on the other. Or more precisely, their mother was somewhere nearby, and Kyle had inserted himself, accidentally and entirely without awareness, into the space between a mountain lion mother and her offspring. This is one of the most dangerous positions any living creature can occupy, not just with mountain lions but with virtually every large predator on Earth. The calculus that governs a mother's behavior shifts completely when her young are perceived to be threatened. The normal caution that keeps predators from engaging with unfamiliar large animals, including humans, is suppressed. What remains is something much more urgent and much less negotiable. She did not attack immediately. This is important. She came out of the brush and she faced him. And she began what wildlife biologists would recognize immediately as threat behavior designed to drive him away. She was not hunting. She was warning. The vocalizations in the footage are striking. Mountain lions have a vocal range that most people who have never heard one find genuinely shocking. They do not roar. The ability to roar is limited to the true big cats of the genus Panthera, animals like lions, tigers, leopards, and jaguars, whose modified larynx produces that deep, resonant sound. Mountain lions belong to a different lineage, genetically closer to the domestic cat than to any of the Panthera species, and their vocalizations reflect this. They hiss, they spit, they make a sound often described as a scream that can carry extraordinary distances through mountain terrain and that has terrified generations of wilderness travelers who heard it in darkness without knowing what produced it. What the female on the Bonneville Shoreline Trail was producing was something between a hiss and a scream, punctuated by what sounded almost like chirps. These are contact calls. Sounds a mountain lion makes to maintain awareness of other lions, including her cubs. She was managing multiple things at once, monitoring her cubs, warning this large unfamiliar biped, and assessing, continuously, whether that biped represented a threat that needed to be escalated. Kyle did something right. He did not run. This is the hardest thing to do in that situation. Every primitive instinct in the human nervous system is screaming at you to run. The legs want to go. The body wants to bolt. The brain, or at least the ancient part of the brain that was shaped long before human beings sat at the top of any food chain, is firing signals that say, move away from the threat as fast as possible. Running triggers predatory pursuit response. This is not a theory. It is a documented behavioral mechanism in virtually every ambush predator. Movement away from a predator at speed triggers the predatory sequence, the same sequence that fires when a deer bolts from a lion, when a rabbit explodes from cover. The fast-moving, retreating object becomes prey. The pursuit begins almost reflexively. Kyle Burgess, without any formal training in mountain lion behavior, and quite possibly without having thought through this logic at all, somehow overrode the most powerful instinct his body was producing and backed away slowly. He did it while talking. This too was the right thing. Maintaining a loud, continuous, confident human voice does several things. It prevents the predator from being able to convince itself that this object might be easy prey. It reinforces the large, strange, unfamiliar quality of the human animal. Mountain lions have no evolutionary programming that tells them humans are prey. We are not deer. We are not elk. We are not anything the mountain lion's ancestral experience has trained it to pursue and kill. We are something outside the normal categories, and a lion trying to decide how to categorize us is a lion that has not yet committed to attacking. But she followed him. This is what elevated the encounter from alarming to genuinely dangerous. She did not stay at the spot where she had come out of the brush. She advanced. Step by step, keeping the distance between them roughly constant, she moved down the trail behind him. Every time Kyle stopped, she stopped. Every time he moved, she moved. She crouched. She flicked her tail. She made herself large and then made herself small again, in the way that cats do when they are preparing to spring. The footage runs for 6 minutes and 15 seconds, and in it she charges him 4 times. Not full-speed charges, feinting lunges, the front end dropping low, and then surging forward several feet before she pulled up. Each time, Kyle threw his arms wide, raised his voice, held his ground. Each time she stopped short and reset to the slow-following behavior. This is predatory probing. She was testing his responses, watching whether the large, unfamiliar biped would break and run under pressure. If he had broken and run even once, it is almost certain she would have pursued. At the speeds a mountain lion can accelerate from a standing start, she would have been on him within seconds. A man running flat out on a downhill trail is still not faster than a lion with a few feet of head start and the architecture of an ambush predator in its legs. He did not run. 6 minutes of this, 6 minutes of walking backward on an uneven trail, while a large predator he cannot take his eyes off follows him and periodically charges. The voice you hear in the footage is not the voice of a man who has compartmentalized the fear and moved past it. It is the voice of a man who is absolutely terrified and is using whatever he has left, vocal cords, arms, presence, to hold a situation together that feels like it could come apart at any second. He is not heroic in the cinematic sense. He is terrified and functional. He is doing the right things because, on some level, he understands that the wrong thing is a choice he cannot afford to make. The encounter ended when a rock connected with the lion's nose. After several minutes of backing down the trail with the lion still following, Kyle picked up a stone and threw it at the cat. It hit her in the face. She flinched, recoiled, and turned, and she was gone. Back into the brush. The encounter was over as suddenly as it had begun. He stood on the trail for a moment. Then he exhaled. Then, you can hear it in the audio, he used language that probably captured precisely what every person watching would have used in his position. And then he kept moving down the trail, because the right thing to do, even after she was gone, was to put distance between himself and that spot. He posted the footage online. By the next morning, it had been viewed millions of times. Wildlife officials reviewed the footage and confirmed that the behavior was defensive rather than predatory. The female was protecting cubs. Her actions, while terrifying for Kyle, were consistent with a lion trying to drive away a perceived threat rather than one attempting to make a kill. They did not euthanize the animal. They did not trap and relocate her. They assessed the situation, determined that she had behaved in a manner consistent with normal mountain lion defensive behavior, and they left her in the canyon. This is also worth talking about because public reaction was divided. A significant number of people who watched the footage believed the lion should have been killed or removed. A significant number of wildlife professionals and biologists pushed back hard on that position. Understanding why requires understanding something about how mountain lions actually relate to human beings across the breadth of their range. Mountain lion attacks on humans are rare. This is not a comforting platitude deployed to reduce public fear. It is a statistical fact rooted in a century of documented records. The Mountain Lion Foundation, which tracks human-lion interactions across North America, has documented fewer than 200 verified mountain lion attacks on humans in the United States and Canada in the period spanning from 1890 to the present. Of those, fewer than 30 were fatal, over more than a century, across a range that includes tens of millions of people living and recreating in mountain lion habitat. Compare that to dogs. Americans are bitten by dogs approximately 4.5 million times per year. About 45 of those bites are fatal annually. Mountain lions kill fewer people in a century than dogs kill in a single year, in a country where both species share space with hundreds of millions of people. This does not mean mountain lions are not dangerous. They are extraordinarily dangerous. They are perfectly designed killing machines, and they are, without question, physically capable of killing a human being. They have done so, they will do so again. But the frequency with which they choose to do so is vanishingly small relative to the frequency of human-lion coexistence in the American West. Why? Because mountain lions do not typically see humans as prey. They see us as large, strange, unpredictable objects that smell wrong and make noise. We do not fit the prey template. A mule deer is something a mountain lion's nervous system recognizes completely. The movement pattern, the size, the smell, the sound of hooves on rock. All of it fits a category labeled prey. A human being running on a trail in trail shoes, wearing synthetic fabric that carries the smell of laundry detergent and sweat, generating footfalls that do not match any prey animal the lion has ever encountered. Making vocalizations that fit no prey category does not fit that template cleanly. But here is where it becomes complicated. Here is where the statistics stop being reassuring and the reality of the animal becomes important again. Mountain lions that have lost their fear of humans entirely, usually through habituation caused by living near heavily used recreational areas, begin to blur that categorical distinction. They have seen humans enough times, and been given no reason to be afraid of humans, that we cease to register as that large, unpredictable unknown, and begin to register as just another animal moving through the landscape. When that shift happens, the prey template can begin to apply, particularly to humans who are running, particularly to humans who are small, particularly to humans who are alone. The cases in which mountain lions have attacked and killed adult humans in the American West in the modern era are almost uniformly characterized by a set of specific conditions. The victim was alone. The victim was moving quickly, usually running or cycling. The terrain provided ambush opportunity, and in many cases, there is evidence that the lion in question had a history of approaching human infrastructure, raiding garbage, or behaving in ways that suggested reduced wariness around people. The attack in 1994 on Whiting Ranch Wilderness Park in California, in which a mountain lion killed runner Iris Kenna, fit these conditions almost perfectly. She was alone. She was running on a trail in low-light conditions. The lion had been observed near the trailhead on previous occasions. The attack in 2018 on Hicks Creek Trail in Washington, in which a mountain lion killed runner Isaac Saterbaum and seriously injured his companion S.J. Brooks, again fit the same template. Solo and paired runners, early morning, lion that had apparently been watching the trail. In that case, the lion was tracked and killed by wildlife officers. It was in good health, well-nourished, with no obvious explanation for why it had targeted the runners rather than the abundant deer prey in the area. These cases are outliers, statistical anomalies, but they are real. And they happened, and they remind us that the distance between an animal that finds humans non-threatening and an animal that finds humans prey is not always as large as we would like to believe. Kyle Burgess's encounter was in the middle of the afternoon on a well-traveled trail close to a major city. It involved a female with cubs, which means the behavior was clearly defensive. The conditions were not those of the higher-risk scenarios, but the outcome could still have been catastrophic. 6 minutes is a long time to hold together the correct behavioral responses under that kind of pressure. Most people would never have practiced for it. Most people have not thought through what they would do. And the human animal running panicked in the wrong direction is something that particular cat, regardless of her defensive motivations, might not have been able to resist pursuing. We survived that interaction intact because one person did something extraordinarily difficult under pressure. That deserves to be understood and respected. Now, let us talk about the larger picture, because the Bonneville shoreline encounter is not an isolated incident. It is one data point in a pattern of increasing human-wildlife interaction along the entire urban wildland interface of the American West, and that pattern is being driven by forces that are not going to reverse themselves. Mountain lion populations in the American West have been recovering for decades. Following the end of bounty hunting programs, which once paid per lion killed and drove populations to critically low levels in many states, and following the increasing recognition of lions as a game animal, requiring management rather than a pest requiring elimination, populations have grown. More lions means more territory needed, which means lions pushing further into lower elevation terrain, closer to developed areas, closer to the trailheads where humans concentrate. At the same time, the human population of the Intermountain West has grown enormously. Salt Lake City and its suburbs have added hundreds of thousands of people in the past 2 decades. Many of those people are outdoor recreationists. They run trails, ride mountain bikes, hike with dogs, bring children. They are out there in numbers the trails were not designed for, in terrain that has always been and continues to be mountain lion habitat. These two growth curves intersect at the trailhead, and they will continue to intersect more frequently, not because lions are becoming bolder or more aggressive in some meaningful biological sense, but simply because there are more of them and more of us, and we are sharing a smaller, effective corridor of space. The response to this, from wildlife management professionals and from the running and hiking community, needs to be grounded in actual biology rather than in either reckless dismissal or paralyzing fear. Both of those responses exist in the public conversation, and both of them are dangerous in different ways. The reckless dismissal, the attitude that encounters are rare enough that preparation is unnecessary, the willingness to run alone at dawn or dusk in canyon terrain without any awareness of what shares that landscape, leaves people unprepared for moments exactly like the one Kyle Burgess had. He was lucky he had the right instincts or something close to them. Not everyone will. The paralyzing fear, the demand that every lion near a trail be trapped or killed, the closing of trails at the first sign of feline presence, is both ecologically counterproductive and ultimately impossible to sustain. Mountain lions are part of these landscapes. They were here before the trails were built. The trails were built through their habitat. Eliminating every lion that comes within proximity of human activity would require killing enormous numbers of animals and would cause cascading damage to the prey populations and vegetative communities that depend on predation pressure for their structure. The middle path is education, awareness, preparation, understanding the biology of the animal well enough to behave correctly when the animal appears. And appearing is always a possibility on any trail in the American West, above a certain elevation and in certain terrain. What does correct behavior look like? It looks like Kyle Burgess backing slowly down the trail. It looks like making yourself large and loud, arms wide, voice continuous and firm, eye contact maintained, never crouching down, never turning to run, never making yourself look like something smaller and faster and easier than what you are. It looks like hiking and running with partners when possible, particularly in dawn and dusk hours when mountain lion activity peaks. It looks like keeping children close and dogs on leash, because both dogs and children trigger predatory interest more readily than adults. It looks like carrying something in your hand on high-risk terrain, a trekking pole, a rock, anything that extends your apparent reach and can be used if the animal closes the distance. It looks like knowing what the land you are running through actually is. Not a park, not a gym with a scenic backdrop. A functioning predator-prey ecosystem with a large fellid apex predator that has been managing this landscape since before the first humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge. You are a visitor. The lion is a resident. That awareness should inform how you move and how you prepare. Let us go back to that trail. Let us think about what Kyle actually experienced in those 6 minutes, from a physiological standpoint, because it illuminates something important about the human animal and its capacity to function under extreme duress. The moment he registered that the large cat was not retreating, his sympathetic nervous system fired. Adrenaline and cortisol flooded his bloodstream within seconds. His heart rate almost certainly spiked to somewhere between 160 and 190 beats per minute or higher, which for a trail runner is not an unfamiliar heart rate during effort, but is utterly different in this context because it is generated by fear rather than exertion. The body's blood flow was redirected away from the digestive system and toward the major muscle groups. His visual field narrowed, time perception distorted. Many people who have survived high-threat encounters report that time seemed to both slow and compress simultaneously, that they remember details with extraordinary clarity, but that the sequence of events seems compressed into a much shorter subjective experience than the clock would suggest. His voice, which you can hear throughout the footage, is the exhalation valve for some of that adrenaline. Talking is a way of regulating an autonomic response that is otherwise almost entirely out of voluntary control. It gives the prefrontal cortex something to do. It keeps the higher cognitive functions engaged at a moment when the primitive brainstem is lobbying loudly for a single response: run. 6 minutes is a very long time to maintain that regulatory effort. Most clinical stress response studies suggest that sustained high-threat arousal of this nature begins to degrade fine motor control and higher cognitive function significantly after the first 60 to 90 seconds. By 3 minutes in, coordination begins to suffer. Decision quality declines. Emotional regulation becomes much harder. By 6 minutes, many people would have either broken and run or frozen completely. Kyle Burgess kept backing down that trail, kept making himself big, kept talking, kept throwing that occasional rock. It was not calm, it was not trained. It was something more impressive in some ways. It was the right behavior performed imperfectly and terrifiedly by someone who was keeping it together, by sheer determination, even as everything in his body was telling him to do something else. We should also acknowledge the footage itself as a document of something important. There is a version of this story in which Kyle does not have his phone out, does not catch any of it, and posts a breathless description to a trail running forum that 300 people read, and most do not fully believe. That version exists for virtually every mountain lion encounter that has ever happened. The runner who made it back to the car shaking, the hiker who watched a lion cross the trail 50 feet ahead, the cyclist who looked over their shoulder and saw something amber and enormous retreat into the brush. These encounters happen, and most of them disappear into private memory, shared with family and a few friends and not much else. The fact that this one was documented changed its reach in a way that has, genuinely, made people safer. Not because it provided a training video on correct behavior, though it did do that, but because it made mountain lions real to millions of people who had been abstractly aware that they existed, but had never viscerally felt what an encounter with one actually was. Real risk management begins with real awareness of the risk. For enormous numbers of trail runners and hikers in the American West, Kyle's 6 minutes of footage made a statistical abstraction into something they could feel in their chest. That matters. That matters in the same way that wildlife conservation's most persistent challenge has always mattered, which is the challenge of making people care about things they have never seen, never touched, and never understood as immediate and personal. The female mountain lion on the Bonneville Shoreline Trail was not a villain. She was a mother protecting her cubs from a large unknown animal that had walked between her and them. She did what her biology required her to do. She assessed. She warned. She escalated when the warning was not immediately heeded. She tested, and when she encountered resistance that suggested this particular biped was not going to be an easy mark, she stopped. She went back to her cubs. She was, in the most direct sense, doing her job. Kyle Burgess was doing what trail runners do. He was moving through a landscape he loved, on a day that felt like 1,000 other days, with no reason to expect that this particular run would be different from any other. The space between those two things, the mother lion doing her job and the runner doing his thing, is the entire story of the human relationship with large predators in the modern West. It is not a story of monsters. It is not a story of villains. It is a story of two animals who both have legitimate claims on the same landscape and who periodically run directly into each other with consequences neither one anticipated. The solution is not to eliminate one of them. The lion was here first, and she serves functions in the ecosystem that nothing else can replace. Predation pressure from mountain lions shapes deer behavior in ways that prevent overgrazing of riparian vegetation. It maintains deer population health by removing the weak and sick. It drives prey into movement patterns that allow vegetation recovery in specific areas. Remove the lions and you do not get a safer wilderness. You get a different kind of damage, slower and less visible, but ultimately more profound. The solution is for the species that builds trails and writes management plans and tells stories on screens to understand the landscape it has chosen to inhabit and recreate in. To carry that understanding with it when it laces up its shoes and heads for the trailhead. To be, in the most literal sense, aware. There is something that wildlife biologists and wilderness educators talk about that gets lost in the translation to popular discourse about dangerous animals. They call it appropriate humility. It is the quality of understanding, viscerally and not just intellectually, that the landscape does not belong to you in any complete or final sense, that you are an animal among animals, that the systems you move through predate you by millions of years and will outlast you by millions more, that your safety in wild terrain is never guaranteed, and that the correct response to that uncertainty is not avoidance, but preparation. Trail running is one of the most honest sports on earth, precisely because it puts you directly inside those systems. There is no glass between you and the landscape, no vehicle, no structure, just your body on dirt, under sky, in terrain that stretches into genuine wilderness within half a mile of most trailheads on the Wasatch Front. That honesty is the source of what makes it beautiful, and what makes it occasionally dangerous. The Bonneville shoreline encounter sits at the center of that honesty in a way that no other piece of outdoor recreational footage has quite matched. It is not manufactured. It is not staged. It is a man on a trail and a lion on the same trail, and 6 minutes of reality playing out in real time with genuine stakes and no guarantee of outcome. Understanding it fully, understanding the lion and the terrain and the biology and the behavior and what Kyle did right and what could have gone differently, is not just interesting. It is the kind of understanding that might, someday, when you are on a trail at first light and something large moves in the brush ahead of you, keep you alive. The mountain lion population in Utah is not declining. The trail running community in Utah is not declining. They will meet again. They will meet on the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and on dozens of other trails along the Wasatch Front and in canyon systems throughout the state. Those encounters will mostly not be seen. They will be felt as a shape disappearing into oak brush, a track in soft soil beside a stream crossing, a sudden absence of bird sound in a section of trail that usually has birds. Sometimes they will be exactly what Kyle Burgess experienced. And in those moments, whether there is a phone in your hand or not, whether anyone ever sees it or not, the biology will be the same. The lion will be the same animal, doing the same thing, following the same logic that has worked for millions of years. And you will be a human being with a choice to make about whether you run or whether you hold your ground. Hold your ground. Make yourself large. Make noise. Back away slowly without turning. Do not crouch. Do not run. Pick up a rock. Use your voice. Give the animal every reason to believe that engaging with you is not worth the cost. And as you back down that trail, talking steadily to something that is watching you with eyes designed to see you perfectly in light you can barely register, remember what you are looking at. Not a monster, a mountain lion. An animal that has been in these mountains since before the first human footprint touched this continent. An animal of extraordinary beauty and extraordinary capability. An animal that has every right to be exactly where it is. And remember, too, that you also have a right to be on that trail. Both things can be true. The wilderness does not resolve that tension for you. It simply presents it and asks what you will do next. Kyle Burgess did the right thing. He made it down that trail. He posted his footage, and 10 million people learned something they had not known before. The lion went back to her cubs. Both of them went home. That is the best possible ending to this story. And it happened because one person, under extraordinary pressure, with no training and no preparation and no time to think, did the thing that needed to be done. Learn from it. Take it with you on every run. The trail is shared. Go out there knowing that. Go out there prepared. Go out there with the kind of respect for what lives in these landscapes that the landscapes have always deserved. And if you are running the Bonneville Shoreline Trail above Salt Lake City, keep your eyes on the scrub oak. She is out there. Her cubs have grown by now. They have ranges of their own, and somewhere on those rocky slopes, in the hours before dawn and after dusk, when the deer move and the light fails, they are moving too. The mountain has not changed. Only our awareness of it has. Make sure yours is enough.